Hey, welcome to the Archaeology Lab. Yes, come on in. Hi, my name is Justin Uline. I'm a PhD candidate at American University. I'm working with my advisor, Daniel Sayers, getting a new archaeological project off the ground. Nobody's ever done an archaeology of American hobos or transient labor in the under the capitalist mode of production, so we're doing something new, something novel. It's been a lot of fun getting started. So the project started with just Dan, my advisor, and myself working to try and find a hobo site that is an archaeological site that would let us excavate the material remains of a hobo jungle or hobo camp on the East Coast. Part of that is just proximity to American University, being able to get to and from the site. But another big part of it is to show that this kind of transient labor did happen on the East as well as the West and Midwest. When people think about hobos, they tend to think of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, and specifically regionally of the West Coast and the Midwest. So one of our goals was to prove that this was a phenomena that was occurring across the nation, not just in specific parts of the nation, but also one that cuts across time, from well before the Depression and into the present. Delta, Pennsylvania is a very special place, particularly for this kind of work. It formed fairly early on. They were doing an industrial form of slate extraction fairly early on, beginning in the 1840s. And then in the 1860s, a railroad was laid in through Delta, and the railroad hub connecting the Maryland and Pennsylvania rail systems was put in Delta, which made it a very easily accessible place for hobos and other transient laborers. And because of the industrial activity there, the slate extraction as well as the meat packing, as well as some agricultural labor, there are farms that line Delta, Pennsylvania. So all of these things kind of culminate in Delta being a very desirable location for hobos. So in my early research trying to locate a hobo site, I began simply by looking at the progression of our railroad network, so looking at where railroad hubs were being placed. And then I overlaid that with looking at industrial expansion, so looking at where new industries were propping up, and for Delta that occurs pretty early on, and it coincides with the railroad in the 1860s, which makes it again a desirable place for hobos to go. So just kind of assuming that the mix of having a railroad and an industrial extraction center in Delta would mean hobos would show up there, I began looking at newspapers, historic newspapers from the Delta area, and I quickly found that there were a lot of references to hobos and tramps and other forms of homeless persons and transient workers, which made it seem like it would be a good place to start an archaeological project. So Dan and I went to Delta and talked with a few people and found that there was a hobo jungle close to Delta. Through our interviews and through newspaper analysis, it seemed like it was a pretty persistent camp. That is to say, people were there frequently and often. Delta is a very important area for this kind of research, but it's also just the beginning of this project. We do want to stay in Delta for some time, but we also want to branch out to show the breadth of this kind of labor across not just the East Coast, but the country as well. So we're currently working on getting more archaeologists involved, on writing grants so we can pay more people to be involved in the project. And we're actively looking for more graduate students, both at AU and at other universities, to join into the project and expand where and what we're looking at. As a member of the community, anybody interested in the project is always more than welcome to come join us, either in the excavations, in the lab, or just on site to see what we're doing. This is very much a public endeavor, and we do want to have members of the Delta community, as well as people who were hobos or who enjoy the history of hobos to be a part of this project. It's possible to do archaeology without engaging the public, but it makes for a much better project when the archaeologist does engage both interested communities, close or nearby towns, any interested persons. For students who are interested in the project, shooting either Dan or myself an email is the best way to get involved, and we're not going to be exclusive at all. If a student wants to be a part of the project, it's very much doable. In our initial phase of excavation, we did a survey of the site. It's a site test pit survey. It's you excavate across the entire site with very small excavation units. Your goal isn't to truly excavate the site, but rather to locate where the major point of the site is. So we did that at the beginning of the summer in early May with a crew of students from American University, undergrad and grad. Our site test pit survey led us to a location at the site very close to the trestle. Trestle is a railroad bridge that crosses, in this case, crosses over a stream and a ravine. So we found, through our site test pit survey, this location, which is roughly 25 meters north of the trestle itself, and it is where a substantial hobo camp, or hobo jungle as they were known in the vernacular, was located.
Hi there, my name is Albert Fuji, and I'm one of the archaeology students here who worked with Justin over the summer at the DeltaAU jungle. On site, we take artifacts that we find and we put them in these paper bags. And then once in the lab, I wash them in just with a sifter in the water, and just to make sure that all of the dirt and the mud has come off of them. And then we dry them for a week or two until they're dry. And then I take the dry artifacts and I sort them. So if you can see this right here, I have sorted earthenware over here, and then we have some more of those peach pits. And so once I've separated them, I bag them individually. So I'll put both peach pits in one bag with all of the information, where we found it on the site, how deep, so that we can analyze it and locate where the artifacts were on the site, so that we can start to see patterns and see exactly where people were living.